Mike.
I'm Sam. Let's get into it.
What are you gonna do? What are you gonna do? I didn't even flinch. That's embarrassing.
Welcome to episode 38 of the Mike and Sam Sports Show. We got a jam-packed episode because sports are back, like we have been talking about the past couple episodes. But before we talk about the NBA, NHL, or MLB, the biggest news we think, because we're just fans of this league, is XFL.
Yeah.
The Rock made an investment of $15 million, so he's buying it from Vince McMahon to The Rock. Danny Garcia and Redbird Capital Investment Group. They bought it from McMahon, which at an extremely low price of $15 million. That's like a complete steal. So XFL 3.0 will be coming to us, I'm sure, in a couple of years. They need to get some talent now because I feel like a lot of the talent has went to the NFL after the league kind of dispersed. So what do you think is going to happen for the future of the XFL?
So I started looking into kind of the deal for $15 million, and I was kind of wondering, wow, why is it so cheap? I know $15 million is expensive for the average human being, but for purchasing a league that was fairly successful, was racking in around 1 million viewers each and every single week for their kind of primetime games, that's a really good deal. And I kind of figured out that all of the original TV deals and all of the, more importantly, the stadium deals were not intact going from the old ownership to new ownership, which I think is very, very huge and significant because the XFL had so much just firepower and manpower with just all their TV deals with ESPN, ABC, NBC, being able to kind of broadcast these games on really significant networks. Not only that, but again, I mean, they're playing at stadiums like MetLife Stadium, like the Coliseum. So it's going to be really interesting to see, yeah, not only are they going to be able to attract talent, but are they going to be able to get some primetime deals with some really big networks, because that's what make these leagues fail and not fail. That's why the AAF did so bad, because they were really just playing on these borderline channels that a lot of people didn't even have on their television. And again, yeah, are they going to be able to get some pretty good stadiums for their athletes to play at?
Yeah, I think similar to Vince McMahon, The Rock he's been in the entertainment business for so long, so he could kind of have some relationship with those networks and work out some deals. Because I mean, USA, the channel USA, I mean that's where WWE has their their time slots during the week.
Yeah.
So I don't know if The Rock has a relationship with USA. I mean, I know he's someone with HBO, so if HBO can even like host some football games, I mean, I feel like The Rock is a good candidate to be able to kind of work out some deals because he knows the business of kind of TV and such. Because even if you look at a league like the PLL, the Premier Lacrosse League, there's very small, 7 teams, and they were able to work out deals with NBC, and they have their games on NBC Sports and the main NBC network. So these small leagues are able to finagle some sort of deal to get a primetime network.
Yeah, if you're able to kind of slot it after the Super Bowl like the XFL was doing, obviously that ended up being disastrous because of COVID. But again, if they're able to do it in kind of a void of not only football, but just in a void of sports in general, I think that would be really key. And again, The Rock, I know he was somewhat like a semi figure in the XFL version 1, where he kind of was at halftime. I think he was at the first game. He was kind of a sideline reporter. He was just a big kind of wrestling figurehead for the XFL. And that's really why the main league, the first XFL, kind of died, because it was too much wrestling, not enough football. And I think really the XFL 2.0 had a perfect balance of both entertainment, experimental football in terms of rules and just playing style, and in just, again, just pure football. So I think that's what people liked. I know me and you loved it. I know me and you were planning on going a game. I know me and you, again, regret not going to a game, but if the XFL 3.0 is anything like 2.0, we'll definitely be tuning in.
Yeah, I definitely want to go to a game. I really regret not going to one. I mean, MetLife, we're very close to MetLife, so we were able to make a trip there, but unfortunately it didn't happen. But yeah, I just concerned what's going to happen to the talent because obviously PJ Walker, who was the potential MVP, is in the NFL now. Jordan Teamu is in the NFL now. They lost just a significant amount of talent because obviously the players thought this league is not gonna. The league's gone. There's no way it's gonna come back to that 0.0 version. So
Yeah,
I
certainly.
didn't expect that to happen.
Yeah, and all it takes is one XFL player to be great in the NFL, or even good, or even a starting caliber player for people to start switching over to the XFL more seriously. I mean, you looked at the effect that a guy like LeBron James had on high school recruits starting to come out of college, or even a guy like Tracy McGrady, Kevin Garnett, guys before LeBron James that really paved the way for LeBron to take that high school to NBA route. So all it takes is for a couple success stories for that to happen, similar to what's happening in the NBA and NCAA right now in the basketball world. You have so many people, so many high talent recruits going to Australia instead of the NCAA, going to the G League instead of the NCAA. So again, if the XFL is able to produce talent at the NFL level, it's going to be huge, and there's going to be a lot of talent coming from college football there.
Yeah, just we're intrigued. We'll be watching what's going to happen in the future of the XFL. But kind of going back to college sports where you just talked about.
Yeah.
Trying to pull up the post on Instagram, but looked like the Pac-12 is kind of unionizing a little bit for what they're going to do for the football season this year. So they released a joint statement with all the players, and they demanded some things from the Pac-12 to be able to, if we're going to play this year with Corona, we want these deals to be put in place so we're compensated. So they want approved health standards from a third party, someone that the players pick and not the Pac-12. They want 50% revenue between the players and the commissioners and the athletic directors, 6 years of medical insurance post-graduation, and then reduce the pay of Larry Scott coaches and administrators. Larry Scott, I believe, is the commissioner of the Pac-12, and he makes around $5 million, which is a large amount of money for a college commissioner. So, I mean, this is a massive step for kind of what's going to come for college football in the future. So what are your thoughts on this so far?
I mean, yeah, it's revolutionary. I really commend these players for being able to do that. But with any union, any successful union, your main thing is just manpower. They're going to need an overwhelming majority of Pac-12 players to sign off on this and legitimately unionize and just be a part of this movement, because if you only have, let's say, 30% of Pac-12 players that really, really are trying to move forward with this and really risk their even academic scholarship and football scholarship to go and do this and make a really big stance against the NCAA, you're going to have so many players who are on scholarship, so many players that are going to walk on to the school, say, and at the end of the day, we don't really care about this. We just want to play some college football, and we just want to have a chance to be, again, a college football player and maybe eventually an NFL player. So, again, they're just going to need a lot of manpower for this to happen.
Yeah, I think the good side with like the Pac-12 is they have some great schools in their conference, and really just great schools as in very smart institutions. So
yeah,
if it was like the SEC, I mean, I'm nothing against those schools, but if you look at schools like Stanford, that's like a top school in the country, and if people fall in line behind Stanford, I think more schools are going to do so. If like Stanford, USC, UCLA, if they're leading the pack, Cal, Berkeley, because those are just really, really smart in schools. Because once you looked at kind of the Ivy League, when they canceled their season, a lot of people held their breath because the Ivy League is the smartest conference in the country. So when the smartest people in the room start saying something, that's when other people fall in line. So if the Pac-12 is going to do this, I'm sure the Big Ten's going to do it, the SEC is going to do it, Big 12 is going to do it. So I think a lot of schools are going to fall in line and kind of create a union among college athletes.
Yeah, no, it's a great point you made. Arguably the second kind of most prestigious academic conference, in my opinion, you can argue is the Pac-12. I know there's others like the Big Ten that are very competitive in terms of academics, but I mean, when you have teams like, again, you said Stanford, a team like Cal, even Washington State, Utah, UCLA, I mean, you have some very intellectual people that are going to these schools. So again, if they can put together a legitimate plan to unionize, I mean, it's going to be huge. I mean, I'm already very impressed with kind of the blueprint they've laid out, because it seems already well put together and well thought together, even more so than kind of the plans for the NCAA season to kind of commence, which is pretty impressive from the students.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is the 50-50 revenue split that they want to do with the athletic directors in the schools, because that's been a debate as old as time for college athletics, is whether they should get paid or not. And I personally think they should get some sort of compensation, because NCAA is a billion-dollar industry. But that's saying because they're putting their health on the line with Corona, if they catch it Corona or anything else happens, that they should be making money for that. Not just their likeness, but they should be making money for putting their own well-being in the way.
Yeah, no, it's certainly frustrating for the players to kind of have a outlook on the season. Let's say they're playing great, they're a senior, they finally earn the starting job, and then they get COVID, they're out for 2 weeks, and then they never even get a chance at the starting position again. And that's just a huge risk these players are going to take. And I think with this proposal, they're kind of doing the classic shoot high and kind of try to meet in the middle because I mean, hell, the NCAA wants the students to get a 0% revenue. And so the players are kind of figuring, hey, let's shoot for 50% and see if we can negotiate this thing down to maybe 20% and then we'd be happy. So again, I think it's a smart tactic with what these players are doing.
Yeah, and then if they unionize some sort of union, that can lead to other like great news for college football video games because I know that they said
Yeah.
we can never make a video game because there's no union for players to kind of plead their case and deserve money for the video game. So if they're able to make some unions, that can be some good news for college video games for the future, which I know a lot of people love playing the old version. I mean, I personally play the old version. You do as well. I mean, if we were able to get a new one, that would be awesome.
No, I know. Again, and I simply don't understand what is stopping these NCAA players from just getting a video game check because I know it's very simple. I'm pretty sure it's left in your little mailbox in your locker room in the NFL each and every single year from your Madden check. It's not a lot of money. I think it's just a couple $1,000s, if that. But I mean, what's the problem with your likeness being used in a game and you getting a couple $1,000 off it? I don't know why the NCAA really tries to control their players like they do, and they just have such a tight grip on all of the restrictions, and they just don't want to see their players making money, and it really just doesn't make sense. And I think it's an old-fashioned rule that's going to quickly really go out of style in just today's society, and I think we're already seeing the kind of precursor to that.
Yeah, because a lot of states have already. I think California was one of them. Georgia might have been one of them that they kind of ruled in the federal courts that players can be paid off their likeness.
Yeah.
So obviously there's huge steps in the right direction for these college athletes, but I just don't know. The NCAA and kind of these old school blue blood type people don't want these athletes to get paid because they think it's just going to ruin college football because they think that like the Bamas of the world are just going to be able to get all these recruits because Nick Saban just go to every recruit and be like, all right, if you come to Alabama, you're going to make the most money because your name's going to be out there the most because we're the best school. They think that's going to happen, which I mean it could, but also on the other side of the spectrum, someone can go, don't you want to be the main guy at like a Cal where you can be the name, build this program up and be that guy there. So I mean, I don't think it would be that insane, but I think college players should be paid. It just might. They're just scared of what's going to happen in the future to the game itself.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's always been kind of somewhat happening under the table, but if they can implement something along the lines of a salary cap almost where they kind of pull together all of the revenue from player likeness and just kind of pull it together for a collective salary cap and every single player kind of gets paid the same amount of money. Now I know every single university doesn't get the same exact revenue at all. But if they can kind of figure out somewhat of a way to do that, so again, yeah, smaller programs don't really suffer, that'd be huge because, I mean, the only reason a cap is implemented in most major league sports that we see, especially the NBA, it's very heavily into, like, it's just very heavy a rule. And I know luxury tax, a lot of teams can't even afford to go over the luxury tax. Again, it's because they don't want the New York teams, they don't want the LA teams to just rule the NBA, and if they can again do something like that in college football, that would be huge.
Yeah, I mean, and also just letting these athletes like make commercials to star in
Yeah.
commercials. They would make so much money off that. Because I saw an article where Trevor Lawrence and Justin Fields, if they were able to make money off their likeness, their net worth would be over $1 million because they're just that popular. They would be able to star in Gatorade commercials, Under Armour commercials, Nike. Like they would be able to make money off themselves because I mean, when you look at a Clemson crowd, people wearing blank number 16 jerseys, everybody knows that that's Trevor Lawrence, but they just, for some reason, they're just not going to allow his name to be on the back, which I think is very, very sad and unfortunate and very unfair.
Yeah, no, that's a great point you make. And I mean, when we look at guys like Baker Mayfield, like Trevor Lawrence, who's so marketable in the college football world, I mean, yeah, he would be getting millions of dollars off of advertisements. And I mean, the second a guy like Baker Mayfield left the NCAA, I mean, he had so many commercials. I feel like during the NFL season, every other commercial is a Baker Mayfield commercial. So certainly, I mean, it's a good thing for these guys to really build that reputation in NCAA football. And I still do think the NCAA does some things for athletes, like give them a platform and an opportunity. But again, for them to not be paid off of that platform and off of that opportunity until they get to the pros, yeah, I do think that's a little bit unfair.
I mean, yeah, because they're making $1 billion industry off these kids' hard labor, and they're not seeing a dime. I mean, obviously they do have scholarships and stipends for food and housing, but I think they should be compensated for more money. But anyways, moving on to the MLB. Last week, the Marlins kind of were shut down for coronavirus, and I just got an alert on my phone that the Cardinals have just topped 13 players with coronavirus. So your St. Louis Cardinals dropping the ball a little bit. What are your opinions?
I don't know what it is with the Cardinals seems like the past 5 years they've been kind of like a very just under the table, very just suspicious franchise. A lot of things going on with that franchise. I know there's kind of a trade scandal going on with them a couple years ago, and now all their players going to the casino, and I know gambling is for some reason even bigger than steroids in the MLB. Like it's just the biggest no-no whatsoever. Now, I know they're just kind of hitting the slots and things of that nature. They weren't gambling on MLB games presumably, but again, I mean, it's just really stupid because I think it was Marquise Goodwin of the Philadelphia Eagles made a great point where I don't blame young guys that want to go out and live their life and they're single and they don't have girlfriends, they don't have babies, they don't have families, and they just want to live their life. They want to hit the casino. They've been working so hard, and again, they don't want to halt their life for just their job. A lot of people still view baseball, basketball, football as their job. So, I mean, for these Cardinals players to just go out and go to the casino, it's really disappointing, but it's just not unpredictable whatsoever. It's just very predictable to me.
Yeah, I mean, these players, I don't know, they're I would give the MLB kind of like 2 more weeks tops before it's in a very, very existential crisis. I mean, if more and more teams are going to be postponed, because if one team gets an outbreak, it's a ripple effect for the team that they're going to play, and then those teams that the other team's going to play. So it's just kind of long branching outcome. But yeah, I think the MLB just really, really dropped the ball with planning this. They kind of I feel like the only protocol they put in place is mask in the dugout, no spitting, and then empty crowds. They didn't try to create any sort of bubble at all. I mean, there's facilities all across the country with multiple baseball diamonds right next to each other. I don't know why they didn't kind of rent out or even buy a place like that and just have players stay in hotels around that area and then play the games in those facilities, and you can run 4 games at a time and even multiple games at a time. So it would just be a quicker season, quicker turnaround. I don't get why that didn't happen.
Yeah, no, it's a great idea. And I know the MLB season, it's only 60 games. They would be in that bubble for a couple months, not, half a year. So certainly, I mean, the bubble is the only way that sports can come back realistically. I mean, we said it a couple months ago when the MLB season was really in a lot of argument and trade talks between the MLBPA and kind of the owners and the commissioner. We kind of saw the writing on the wall and saying, this is such a fierce, just kind of back and forth. And for them to just make a decision, make an agreement all of a sudden out of midair, just out of the blue, and just, oh, everything is all sunshines and rainbows, when in reality, it was kind of just built on this fake presumption that this quote unquote bubble that's not really in existence was going to work. Yeah, I mean, it was very predictable again and very disappointing that the MLB season was going to come to a halt. And I think it's almost just nearly a fact that the MLB season is not going to play out, which is just very disappointing.
And then you just have the commissioner kind of calling out players saying they need to clean up their act and stuff. But I mean, he hasn't done anything to make any incentives or anything. He kind of just threw them out there. I mean, if I was a young player, I know it's kind it's a pandemic, obviously. But if I was a young player, there's no incentive for me. There's no bubble, there's nothing, no protocols in place. I mean, I would go out once in a while. I mean, he's expecting them to stay in the hotel all day, but they can't do that. Like the NBA, the NHL, they set up facilities. There's cornhole tournaments. I mean, they have like a game room. There's other stuff for these basketball players and hockey players to get their mind off things. But Rob Manfred's just expecting them to stay in their hotel the whole time. The baseball players aren't going to do that. It's like some sort of torture just staying in your hotel room for 24 hours a day.
Yeah, certainly. And I mean, the NHL, they've been phenomenal. I think the NHL has executed it even better than the NBA has, but even the NBA, yeah, you have some guys that are doing the same exact things as guys on the St. Louis Cardinals are doing, same thing the guys on the Miami Marlins are doing. But guess what? You make an example of them, you quarantine them, you don't allow them to be with their teammates so other people are affected. And again, you just make an example of them. And the MLB, certainly, I mean, they're not going to make an example of the Astros. So why would they make an example of the Miami Marlins players or the St. Louis Cardinals players? It's just a very weak, just kind of commissioner office with Rob Manfred and just the entire MLB kind of owners collectively. Again, it just seemed like the MLB owners didn't even care if there was a season or not, because again, I know for the St. Louis Cardinals, we were talking about them again a couple months ago because their owner came out and said that this team isn't even that profitable. Like, I don't even really care anymore. I'm in the red with the St. Louis Cardinals team. I'm trying to sell them. So, I mean, obviously, organizations like the Marlins, who really have been shaky the past decade, and even organizations like the Cardinals, who have been very outstanding, just very little lack of effort for them to the point where, yeah, it's not surprising that they have a COVID outbreak.
Yeah, but then I mean, on the field, you're still having very, very entertaining games. I mean,
Yeah.
The Yankees are dominating. I mean, I'm a Yankee fan, so I've been glued to the TV watching their games. But I mean, they're scary good. And if you have a team with that much potential, that much promise, and then just waste a season, I mean, it's very unfair. And I mean, if you look at the Dodgers as well, I mean, they have talent all over the field too. Mookie Betts, just adding him for a 13-year contract. But these great teams are being wasted away if this season ends early. It would just be if I was like the owner, I would be extremely pissed off if I worked extremely hard to put a great team together and then just nothing will happen of it. No championship at the end of the season, nothing.
Yeah, certainly. It's really disappointing for, again, teams like the Dodgers, teams like the Yankees that are really starting to click and really had high aspirations. An organization that has such a high just player salary roll to the point where you can't afford to be paying these players hundreds of millions of dollars on some of these contracts. Stanton, I mean, obviously Jarrett Cole, again, Aaron Judge, these players that are getting paid very high amounts and are doing great for your team, but you're not even going to have a season. Again, it's really disappointing. And we've seen Aaron Judge be very up and down in his career. I feel like at some points he's really had a strikeout problem and has really struggled with that. And at other times he looks like an absolute superstar. And overall, yeah, he's on an absolute roll like he should be doing on an absolute tear. And it's just disappointing to see, or potentially see, this season come to an end for the MLB.
Yeah, I mean, Aaron Judge is absolutely on fire. I think 6 home runs in 5 games. I think he's the early front runner for American League MVP right now. But someone like Giancarlo Stanton, who I think this season, if they play this whole season out, it'd really help him a lot because he's someone who, if there's fans in the stands, they let him get in the head a little bit, and he kind of gets shaken up easily. That's why when he started, New York fans are very intense. So if you're playing poor in New York, you get the fans let you hear it, even if you're the home team. So without having fans, he's been playing really well. So I think if he was able to kind of complete this full season, he would gain some confidence in himself. But with that, if the season ends, I mean, that's not going to happen. That's not going to help him out at all.
Yeah, no, I certainly think it's a very interesting phenomenon to see which players play better without fans and which players play worse. Like, I think a guy like Clayton Kershaw is a guy that would potentially play better without fans. But a guy like Bryce Harper, I know that, again, he wasn't too successful at the beginning of his Phillies career. And I mean, Philadelphia is another city that they're going to let you hear it. They're going to boo you. They're going to cuss you out if you're on their team and you're playing poorly. And I know he had just a stretch last year where he's really struggling. And then I think he got an absolute just rain of boos when he was stepping up the plate at Philadelphia, and he hit a home run. Then after that, he went on just an absolute, I think it was like a 15-game tear where he was just lighting the entire MLB world on fire. So it's really interesting to see some of those players do really good with fans there, and some players just not really perform well.
Yeah, I mean, baseball in an extremely tough spot. I want it to continue. I like watching baseball on a Sunday evening.
Yeah.
But moving on to the NHL and NBA, unlike the MLB, they have a great bubble in place. I mean, zero positive tests in the past round of testing for both leagues. But the NBA having the rest of their regular season games all weekend. I mean, I was glued to the TV all weekend, and also the NHL starting on Saturday, jumping right into the playoffs. And I mean, nothing's better than NHL playoffs in my opinion. I mean, those are the most intense games around. But let's start off with NBA at the beginning, and then we'll go into the NHL. But NBA, I think the game of the weekend was the Rockets Mavericks. I mean, just a track meet, pure scoring. It's so fun to watch. I mean, it was awesome. If you like fast-paced sports, I mean, that was the game for you.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, I watched that entire game. I mean, that game was insane. I thought the highlight of the entire game was James Harden. I mean, he's an absolute magician. He needed to miss that second free throw to go to overtime, and I've never seen a more perfect. Now I believe it was Steven Adams a couple of years ago who had a perfect kind of bounce off the rim to himself, kicked it out to Russell Westbrook, and then Russell Westbrook made that shot, really captivated his MVP season. But besides that, I've really never seen a better example of a guy missing on purpose. Robert Covington got the rebound off the board, put it in, and they ended up winning in overtime. But really for the Mavericks, I think it's a bigger story for the Mavericks than it is Rockets because it sums up their season perfectly. If you have not watched Mavericks basketball at all this season and you just tune into that game, that is just a perfect representation of their season because they look like a legit top 5 team in the NBA the first 3 quarters of every single basketball game. I think analytically they're a top 5 scoring team in the entire league. They just have a great offense. And then in the fourth quarter, they just cannot close for whatever reason. They don't have the defensive personnel to close. They really hone in on Luka Doncic, and they dare guys like Tim Hardaway to create off the dribble, who usually does a good job at it, but for whatever reason, this is just a very poor closing team, and that's what we saw in that NBA game.
I mean, yeah, the Rockets, such a small lineup. I mean, Porzingis did have 36 points, but I mean, it should have been going down. The Mavericks should have gone down the court every time and try to feed Porzingis as much as possible because I mean, the Rockets had PJ Tucker at center for a lot of the game. I mean, if PJ Tucker is, I don't know, it's probably 6'2", I would say 6'3", and Porzingis is 7'2", so just feed Porzingis. They should have done that the whole game. But yeah, I think the biggest part of this is the Rockets. I think the Rockets are building up a lot of momentum, a lot, because they obviously last night they beat the Bucks, which is a big game for them as well. But these two regular season games and maybe the rest of the regular season games, I think the Rockets are going to build up a lot of momentum more than other teams, and they can be kind of a dark horse if they have that momentum going into the playoffs because James Harden is just playing unconsciously, really. I mean, Russell Westbrook's playing great as well. So, like, they're clicking right now, which is really good for them.
Yeah, and I just think James Harden continues to be arguably the most disrespected NBA player on the planet. I know Kendrick Perkins was very upset about Max Kellerman kind of giving him a lot of disrespect. Very great viral moment that happened in that ESPN take right there. But, I mean, again, every single time I see James Harden legitimately have that fire in his eyes and hone down and play defense, he's a really good defender. Like, he's above NBA average, just a really, really good defender. We usually see those all-time great players, such as Michael Jordan. He's not known for his passing, but when he really wants to pass, he could be an incredible passer. And just that's the testament to the great players in basketball. If they really want to do something, they can be great at it. And James Harden is just another example of that. If he wants to be a great defender, he can be a great defender. And I always think back to those 2012 finals where wasn't Kevin Durant guarding LeBron James. It wasn't Serge Ibaka guarding LeBron James. It was James Harden guarding LeBron James. And now he didn't guard him with much success as it was a gentleman's sweep that series, hence our name. But had to do a little shout out there. But again, I mean, James Harden, every time he's honed in, I mean, he's playing really smart. And again, I think that's going to be a common theme for Giannis Antetokounmpo. He's going to have to get over that hump of the last minute of the game where he plays incredible all game, but for lack of a better term, he chokes at the end of the game.
Yeah, I think James Harden just pisses a lot of people off because he has such a relaxed play style. He just kind of moseys his way down the court when he has the ball, and I think that just angers a lot of people because they just want to see more intensity out of him. But yeah, with Giannis, I mean, Giannis obviously front runner for MVP.
Yeah.
LeBron up there as well. But yeah, Giannis has not performed well in crunch time for these first two games that he has had. I mean, obviously the first game they played the Celtics. The Celtics, right? I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, they did.
Played the Celtics, and last night the Rockets, they were winning and they lost that. I mean, Giannis, a lot riding on the Bucks organization to perform because Giannis has the writing is on the wall that he might leave after this year if they're not really able to win a championship. So, I mean, they're coming out flat for someone who they're the face of their franchise is threatening to leave, and they're just playing awful.
Yeah, I mean, it's really funny for me because I think Giannis is still relatively new to the NBA world in terms of being a superstar player. And I feel like every single time somebody's new to NBA superstardom, they're kind of at the stage where, oh, they can do no wrong. They can't be criticized. They're just this great, fantastic player. And then when things start to happen, a couple seasons progress, you're going to start to pick up your haters and you're going to really get called out for things you lack in or just things you've kind of failed at in your career. And I think we're teetering on the point where if Giannis Antetokounmpo comes short of the NBA Finals this season, I really do think he's going to be very scrutinized and just very pressured to perform even better. And I think that's something that really people understate is the perception of a player and how the player wants to kind of change that perception, because I think without the constant scrutiny that the Cavs organization got and just LeBron got early on in his career, oh, he's such a playoff choker, this and that. I mean, again, I don't know if he goes to Miami. I don't know if Kevin Durant goes to goes to Golden State if the just kind of the perception around him was, oh, OKC chokes and he chokes with OKC.
Yeah, I think that's what separates basketball from a lot of different sports. I think because it's so personalized with the players, I think that they're more kind of accustomed to changing teams because they want to win a championship. So obviously LeBron did that, Kevin Durant did that, the highly scrutinized Kevin Durant move. So I wouldn't be surprised if Giannis did that, but it would just be a major loss by the Bucks because he was such a steal in the draft. I mean, if they lose him, I don't know how they're going to really recover in a small time frame because they don't have great players around him, really. I mean, Chris Middleton is the second guy up, and he's very, very shaky and a very poor performer in the playoffs as well.
Yeah, and I mean, it's going to be huge for the NBA for Giannis Antetokounmpo if he leaves Milwaukee, because what that will definitively say and prove for me is that the Supermax doesn't work. It's not profitable to be a small market organization, a small market team, and the small market teams just get the short end of the stick, because if you look at the Milwaukee Bucks, they've done everything in their power within their salary cap to surround Giannis Antetokounmpo with talent and to surround him with a championship roster. I mean, they couldn't keep Malcolm Brogdon without letting go of Chris Middleton. It was either Chris Middleton or Malcolm Brogdon. We saw a very similar situation with the OKC Thunder where it was either Serge Ibaka or James Harden. Obviously, they picked the wrong decision there. But again, if they aren't able to entice Giannis Antetokounmpo with a supermax contract and he takes significantly less, I'm talking $30 million less on his deal to sign somewhere else. I mean, again, it's going to be really bad news, I believe, for the NBA and especially for small market teams.
Yeah, I mean, as a Knicks fan, I hope the Knicks make a push for Giannis. I don't know if that would happen. They're pretty incompetent ownership, honestly. So
yeah,
fingers crossed. But I mean, I saw some things. I don't know if this is true. If the Warriors will make a major push for Giannis, so obviously they lost Kevin Durant, and if they're able to replace him with Giannis, I don't know how his play style would kind of coincide with the spot up shooting of Klay Thompson, Steph Curry. It could be kind of a yin and yang type relationship where he's under the boards and grabs everything and puts it back up. So that can be a very scary combination for the NBA world.
Yeah, I mean, they'd certainly need to get rid of Draymond Green if that was the case, and they would certainly just transition to, and I think Andrew Wiggins would be gone too. I think Andrew Wiggins is going to be gone nonetheless, but that's a conversation for a different time. But I mean, that would be the best basketball team in the world, in my opinion. You'd have 4 out, 1 in, Giannis Antetokounmpo being the one guy in, 4 guys on the perimeter. I mean, that would be an absolutely deadly team. And I think the Warriors are already kind of making chess moves while everyone else is playing checkers, somewhat figuratively, for the 2020s, kind of taking the season off, which, hell, if you want to take a season off, this was the season to take off. So, I mean, again, if the Golden State Warriors can legitimately make a push for Giannis, which I don't think is out of the question because, I mean, who thought Kevin Durant would be on the Warriors, right? So, again, if they can land Giannis, I mean, I think they can win at least 3 more championships.
Yeah, and then also adding the point that they have a potential lottery pick this year, so they're going to add a great. I mean, this draft is in question with the talent, but they're still going to be able to get a lottery draft pick, which is the person's definitely going to be a great player that they pick. But I just remember a little sidebar story that when Kevin Durant signed with the Warriors on July 4th, my birthday, and Kevin Durant was my favorite player, and that put a real damper on the day.
No, I remember that very, very vividly. We were hanging out, and I just remember kind of seeing on Instagram everybody reposting the cupcake post by Russell Westbrook, and I was kind of like, what was that all about? And it was just a bunch of cupcakes and like happy 4th, y'all. And it was just kind of like a jab at Kevin Durant, and then me seeing that Kevin Durant is on the Warriors. That was probably the craziest day in NBA history, and we knew, I mean, they were going to win every single championship with a healthy Kevin Durant, which they did.
Yeah, that was just they were just so dominant. I mean, their bench did take a hit, so that kind of hurt them with the last year's finals because they didn't really when Clay went down, KD went down, they kind of didn't have much around Steph. But yeah, they just pure dominance with Kevin Durant on the Warriors. So if they're able to add Giannis, I mean, I think it would just be more of the same for the next couple of years, the next decade.
Yeah, certainly.
But moving on to the other storylines in this playoffs, I mean, the Pelicans, the NBA handed them a silver spoon. Now, here's your schedule. Go make the playoffs, and they're just completely dropping the ball. Game 1, they played a Jazz team, which after watching the Jazz, I think they're extremely overrated. They need to kind of blow up that core a little bit because they are a good regular season team, but I think they'll make no noise in the playoffs. I think they need to trade out Rudy Gobert. But yeah, the Pelicans lose Game 1. They're winning at most of the second half, I believe, and they blew a lead. And then the next game they lost as well. So I mean, put Zion in. I don't get why Zion is under minute restriction. His injury was a while ago. Put Zion in. That's how you're going to win games. They're completely dropping the ball, these Pelicans.
Yeah, I don't know what it is with Alvin Gentry with his rotations. I mean, when you have a guy like Frank Jackson, a backup point guard who I think last game shot 5 for 15 off the top of my head, when you got that guy playing more minutes than Zion Williamson, I mean, you're not winning basketball games. I don't know what it is, what the deal was with the Pelicans and their expectations going into this bubble. Again, they got handed a silver spoon with their schedule, the easiest schedule in terms of win percentage by the teams in the regular season by a pretty significant margin. And again, they're just treating these games like any other 82 regular season games when every single game for the Pelicans is a very, very high intensity playoff game. It needs to be. And I think it really shows the lack of experience from the players, but more importantly, the lack of experience from this coaching staff.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the Jazz and the Clippers were their hardest 2 games. They got those out of the way, so they are going to play the Grizzlies tonight, and then the Kings, Wizards, Spurs, Kings again, and then Magic. So they have a cakewalk for the rest of the year, but playing against those 2 playoff teams, that's when you need to come out the most intense, and they did not come out at all. I mean, the Pelicans, really, the first half, they were awful against the Jazz. I mean, they only stayed in that game because of J.J. Redick. He played really well. I mean, we have a separate video about this if you want to watch that, the game recap. Another little nod to our videos, but yeah, they're so shaky. It's like a roller coaster with them. They're good at one point and bad the next point. I mean, and the Clippers, they got absolutely just destroyed. I think the Clippers were a little bit mad because they did lose to the Lakers the night before, but they got absolutely destroyed by the Clippers. I mean, the Clippers were just shooting all over them.
Yeah, I know Bleacher Report did positional rankings going into the bubble, and I saw Derek Favors was like the 12th best center in the league. And I mean, Derek Favors, he's a good player, but if you run Derek Favors at the 5, I mean, you're gonna have one of the worst interior defensive teams in the entire NBA. I mean, this roster was just very poorly just put together, in my opinion. When you have a guy who's 6'6", who, quite honestly, at this point in his career is horrible at defending the pick and roll, in Zion Williamson, again, a 6'6" power forward, you gotta pair him with a 7-footer, and to have a borderline 6'10" center who's playing alongside of him. I mean, it's no surprise that this defense has really suffered so far in the bubble and really has suffered throughout this NBA season.
Yeah, and I mean, Jackson Hayes is just kind of a liability. He's just kind of a body out there. So they need to really develop him and make him a tandem. I mean, we already talked about this in our last episode, but they need to make him a great tandem with Ingram and Zion. Because if they have a solid core with kind of Ingram, Zion, Jackson Hayes, Lonzo Ball, if he can just be a solid point guard. I mean, the first game, Lonzo was atrocious. So they just need all these players to step up. They're dropping the ball. No pun intended, but they're playing terribly.
Yeah, certainly. And I mean, I think a very big matchup today is going to be the Jazz versus the Los Angeles Lakers, two teams we did see on opening night. Again, you have a Jazz team that, I mean, has looked very underwhelming. I think Donovan Mitchell, after his rookie season, has been a bit overrated. I do love D. Mitch, and I think he's a very explosive player, spider out there. But again, Donovan Mitchell, I certainly think he's been a little bit inefficient. I think he needs to kind of develop more of his overall game and kind of hone in kind of his weaknesses and his strengths. But again, I mean, if the Lakers aren't able to win this game and they kind of come out flat again, I'm not going to say I'm going to start to get worried about LeBron James coming out flat, because I think we do need to give him the benefit of the doubt at this point in his career. And I think we need to kind of see him play really bad over an entire playoff stretch for us to definitively say, yeah, I mean, he's not the same player he used to be. But again, for this entire Lakers squad, I mean, it's more of the same for this team. You have a guy in Rajon Rondo who is notorious for being one of the biggest turnarounds from regular season to playoff basketball in NBA history in terms of really just heightening his play. That guy goes out, and you have a bunch of guys like Caldwell Pope, who played really bad in the last game, and just a bunch of guys that are unproven in the playoffs. I mean, yeah, it's going to be pretty disastrous for the Lakers if they fall to the Jazz tonight, I believe.
I mean, what I personally think is I think the Lakers went out there and tried their very hardest against the Clippers, won that game, and I think they're just going to coast for the rest of the games. I don't know if they're going to win one more game. I think they're just going to go 1-7. I think that's what's going to happen. But I mean, if they do go 1-7 in these games, I mean, coming out that cold in a playoff series, I think they're going to be kind of a rude awakening for whoever's going to play them at the 8 seed. I mean, if it is the Grizzlies, that might be a bit easier because the Grizzlies are pretty weak. I mean, they do have Jaren Jackson, who played incredible in the game against the Trailblazers. But if they're going to come out flat, I think the Lakers do if they don't win another game here in the regular season.
Certainly. I mean, if you play a team like the Trailblazers where, I mean, if you're the Lakers, you're paying more attention to the Grizzlies games and the Trailblazers games than you are your own games, because that's how important it is who you play in the first round. But again, I mean, if they're able to kind of beat up on a Memphis Grizzlies who, even despite how good Ja's doing, he's been a little bit inefficient so far in the bubble. I know Jaren Jackson Jr. has been really good. Jonas Valanciunas has been really good too, but they kind of lack kind of the supporting talent around them to be a legitimate playoff contender, in my opinion. Obviously, they're a fringe playoff team, as we've seen throughout the season. But again, I mean, if they play a team like the Trailblazers, who Gary Trent Jr., I think he's kind of an unsung hero of the bubble so far. He's been playing phenomenal off the bench. I mean, absolutely phenomenal.
And Carmelo Anthony has been playing phenomenal as well for the Trailblazers.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, you have Skinny Melo actually playing really good defense as well. If you play a team like that who certainly is going to outshoot you, and if they can D you up, I mean, I would not be surprised if that series was taken to 7 games.
I mean, it could definitely happen. But another point I want to make, looking at the Nuggets game on the score right now because they are playing right now, and Michael
Yep.
Porter Jr. has 18 points in 13 minutes.
Wow.
I mean,
That's
yeah, Zion Williamson had what? He played 15 minutes the first game. How many points did he have?
I know he went 6 for 10. I believe he had. I mean, if you do the math on that, I'm not sure. I think he had around 12 points or so. But
Yeah, but Michael Porter Jr. 18 points in 13 minutes. That is pretty astonishing. I mean, I haven't been the biggest Michael Porter fan. I mean, he has been injured since he was at Mizzou. He's had some back injuries, but I mean, he could be scary good. If the Nuggets are able to develop him more, they can be scary good if they have a very, very tall and lanky team because he can become another piece if he becomes an all-star level player.
yeah, I think their rebuild, I mean, even though it's been very incredible, I think it has been a bit stagnant over the past year and the past offseason. So if a guy like Michael Porter Jr., who I know they do play him a lot at the 4, but if they can ideally play him at the 3, maybe play a Bol at the 4 and then play Jokic at center, I mean, that would be an absolutely deadly lineup. Yeah, Michael Porter Jr., he's a guy they really struggle with kind of just creation in those last few minutes of the game, something that I think the Bucks struggle with too, something that even the Mavericks struggle with surprisingly. So again, if they're able to get that guy in Michael Porter Jr., yeah, that'd be huge because their salary cap surprisingly is very tied down to some guys like Jamal Murray who really hasn't stepped up to that max contract expectation that the Nuggets organization put on him. So again, if Michael Porter Jr., he's shown flashes of being great. He's shown flashes of being really just that next really, really great wing player in the NBA, like we've seen with LeBron James, Kawhi Leonard, Paul George, all those players. So if he's able to be even an all-star caliber player for this Nuggets team, it could be the last piece to their puzzle.
Yeah, I think because they do have a great core. But they are very young and inexperienced. So if they are able, like we said, if they're able to develop Michael Porter, get some playoff experience, more playoff experience under their belt this year, I do think that they might lose in the second round. I mean, they could make it to the Western Conference Finals somehow, but I think what the key for them is more and more playoff experience because they are so young, and if they keep getting that, they can get over the hump eventually with more all-star players on their team.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, looking at this box score further, I mean, their highest scoring player besides Michael Porter Jr. right now is Paul Millsap with 6 points. So, I mean, he's definitely carrying this team, and he's really a guy they're going to need in the playoffs because I really looked at Bol and looked at some of his games in the scrimmages and kind of said, yeah, this is nice for the scrimmages. He's going to play some regular season minutes, but come playoff time, I'd be surprised if Bol was getting more than 10 minutes. But Michael Porter Jr. is a guy. I mean, he's not just a regular season player. They're really going to need him to step up in the playoffs.
Certainly. Speaking of playoffs, hockey playoffs have started, Stanley Cup playoffs, so they had some games on starting on Saturday with Rangers Hurricane. I mean, the Rangers one game away from being swept already, 3-game sweep with the 5-game series. But I think the shocking storyline of hockey so far with the playoffs are the Blackhawks and the Canadiens, two 12 seeds beating the 5 seed. So, I mean, the Blackhawks came out there and they were just pouring goals in all game against the Oilers. The Oilers are prolific offensive team with McDavid and Leon Draisaitl, but I don't know, the Blackhawks just came out and they were scoring. Obviously, they have extreme playoff experience with Patrick Kane, Jonathan Toews, Duncan Keith, but I did not expect them to kind of beat the Oilers the way they did, and then obviously the Canadiens beat the Penguins in overtime, which is a very, very fun game to watch, but I think the bigger storyline was the Blackhawks coming out of this weekend.
Yeah, again, that's something that's just so huge about NHL playoffs, and that's why we love it so much, and that's why I think from a lot of sports fans, I think me and you consider the NHL playoffs to be really the most prolific and just exciting playoff kind of bracket out of any sport, really, just because of how much more physicality matters come playoff time, how much more, not even experience necessarily. I know you touch upon that with the Blackhawks, but so much like defense just has to do with these playoffs and how much momentum has to do. So again, if you pick up a game and you're that 11 seed, 12 seed, and you're really just able to ride the wave like the Blackhawks have been able to do, yeah, that's absolutely huge.
Yeah, I think we're just going to – these playoffs, I mean, they are 24 teams, so there's more teams involved, but I think these are going to be some of the best hockey we're going to ever see in our lives. I mean, I think these teams are going to try so hard. And I don't think it's that crazy out of the question for a lower seed like a 10-seeded team, an 11-seeded team, a 12-seeded team to make a run at the Stanley Cup. I mean, because hockey is just it's so crazy. The underdogs are never really out of it. Honestly, I mean, even like the Blues last year, the Blues were the worst team in the league in January, and then they came back and they were able to win the Stanley Cup. So, I mean, if you have morale on the ice, that's what's really going to help you. Hockey is more about, I feel like, the brotherhood on the ice
Yeah.
versus just one guy's skill.
Yeah, no, I was just about to touch upon that too. And I really think, I know we talked about this with the NBA bubble, but let's talk about this with the NHL bubble a little bit. How is your team going to react when you have a really bad game? I mean, your goalie let in 4 goals that game on only 20 shots or so, and you have to go back into that bubble and be with those players for the next 2 days before your next playoff game. I mean, tensions could rise, and really your team chemistry, again, is going to be tested. And how much fun and how much like that high you're going to be riding on when you come off that great electric game and you're really playing together and you're having so much fun in the bubble with your guys. So I certainly think that's going to be a major aspect of it. Again, teams aren't going to be able to ride the momentum from their home crowds and their away crowds. So really the momentum will lie within the players themselves.
Yeah, and also like looking at the stadiums, I think hockey did an outstanding job.
Yeah.
I mean, they're playing in the stadium of the Oilers and they're playing the stadium of the Toronto Maple Leafs, but they didn't make it seem like it's an empty arena. They put some sort of covers on the stand, so it's not empty seats. They put bigger screens around the stadium for the players to look at for timeouts and stuff like that and replays. But I think hockey did a really great job. Also with the bubble, like we said, 0 positive tests in the most recent round of testing, so they're really killing it. I don't know what's going to happen with the Stanley Cup Finals when the Eastern Conference team has to travel to Edmonton. Because they're probably going to have to quarantine for 2 weeks, I would assume. But that's going to be a bit of a. I feel like that's going to be a poor time off if each team has to wait 2 weeks to play a series if they're going in there with all the momentum, because that's just going to kill the momentum. It's more skill versus skill at that point.
Yeah, no, I think that I know the NBA just today announced that they're going to kind of lax in their rules with the quarantining and the testing in terms of if you do have a negative test the first couple of days within you being back, you don't have to quarantine for 2 weeks. You can just come right back from a negative test. But again, I think that's something that the NHL is going to start to feel more comfortable with and kind of implement. But I kind of want to touch upon the point you just made a little bit earlier with just watching NHL hockey. It's absolutely phenomenal. I think it's even better. I think it's much better, honestly, than the NBA bubble, which I still do think is phenomenal. Just because, again, just visually it looks phenomenal. You just can't even tell that there's no fans. Obviously, the noise isn't quite on the par with the electricity of playoff hockey and what the fans bring there. But more importantly, I just think hockey in general is the most aesthetically pleasing sport to the ear in terms of it's not football and guys aren't killing each other in that nature. And obviously football, you can't really hear them stomping on the turf or the ground. In basketball, you just kind of hear shoes squeaking the entire game, but just to kind of hear the cuts and just all that on the hockey rink and just on the ice, I just think it sounds beautiful and it certainly looks great.
Yeah, that's one plus of no fans. I mean, the noises of skating around and kind of deflecting pucks against the poles, and then also with baseball, I mean, hearing the crack of the bat every time someone is at bat is just an awesome sound, because that's like hearing the crack of a home run is just a top sound in all of sports. I mean, nothing better than that. So I mean, obviously, that's one bonus of looking at it without fans. You definitely can hear more kind of chattering and trash talking on the court. I know hockey and NBA are kind of trying to limit that a little bit because they're just scared about what curse words are going to be thrown out. But yeah, I mean, the NBA and NHL definitely just doing an extremely great job with these bubbles. And then, I mean, the MLB should take some notes, I think.
Yeah, and I just think we're kind of projecting it onto the NFL now where, I mean, we're looking at the MLB, how they're doing, how poorly they're doing, and then we're seeing how great the NHL is doing, and then NBA is doing very good as well. And I just really think the writing is on the wall with these positive tests coming into the NFL. I think they're kind of hiding it a little bit more than all the other sports leagues have been I think a good reason for that is because they haven't started actual games yet. But again, I mean, I do think the writing is on the wall for the NFL season to, at best, in my opinion, right now, to have 14 games or so and then just kind of call it quits or jump right into the playoffs, sadly.
Yeah, I think NFL they're gonna have to do something better with their protocols because Odell said he doesn't know like they should just cancel a season because the protocols are very off. But yeah, the NFL they need to these next couple weeks they really need to have some meetings with their personnel and figure out what they're gonna do with a bubble or just more safety protocol and such.
Yeah, and I just wanted to talk about one thing with the NFL. Really surprising thing. I just saw it right before we started recording, and it's Todd Gurley's birthday today. And just kind of by the looks of it, I was like, oh, was Todd Gurley turning 30 today? Todd Gurley's turning 26 years old today. And I would just like to get your reactions on that because, I mean, he certainly is not playing like a 26-year-old right now.
Yeah, I don't know. Definitely, that's really weird. You don't think about that. I think he would be a lot older just because his body has been so worn out. So you're like, because with the running backs, I feel like their expiration date is 30 years old. That's when they start
Yeah.
to fall off. But Todd Gurley has fallen off long before that. I mean, sadly, he's a really fun player to watch. I think it kind of started at Georgia with he had a severe knee injuries at Georgia
Mhm.
and just kind of took a toll on him this early in his career, sadly. I mean, the Rams already moved on from him, and then who knows what's going to happen with the Falcons if he's able to perform at a level that he once was in his first couple years with the Rams.
Yeah, certainly. I don't see him playing past the age of like 32. I think there's no way at this point because, yeah, I think just really the tread on his tires really just caught up to him. And it's like a very sad 26th birthday for him as an NFL fan, in my opinion, just to look at, oh my gosh, he was a rookie not too long ago. And I think the expiration date has even moved even like forward to that 30-year-old position because we look at guys from that draft class like Melvin Gordon, like Todd Gurley. I mean, they're not even top 10 running backs in the league anymore, which is just really surprising.
And that just kind of adds to the how great I mean not Antonio, Adrian Peterson is and Frank Gore
Yeah.
could just be able to perform at such, I mean not as high as levels as they once were, but they're able to still play this late into their career. So that just shows how what physical specimens they really are.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, great. And if I was, I mean, I'm always that guy to buy the jersey of a player and then they either get hurt, they stop being good, or they switch teams. So certainly a little buyer's remorse on anybody trying to buy an NFL running back jersey right now. Just kind of beware.
Yeah. Thank you everybody for watching. We hope you enjoyed this episode. We had a fun time making it, but we'll see you in the next one.